everyone. Welcome back to the Brick City Brown Chick Show. I wanted to say happy Black History Month, one and all. And remember, you don't need anyone's permission to celebrate your Blackness. So keep that in mind. This week, I wanted to talk about the Grammys. But I want to talk about it from a perspective I haven't heard all week. And specifically, I want to talk about Blue Ivy Carter, who is the 13-year-old daughter of Beyonce and Jay-Z. She was with her mother at the Grammys. She went up on stage with her when she received her award for Best Country Album. And I have heard a lot of talk in the last few months about this young girl because she is a girl. She's 13 years old, and how mature she looks, and how old she looks, and how her parents shouldn't let her wear this or that, and how they shouldn't let her wear makeup, and all this blah, blah, blah about her. And I would like to talk about her from the perspective of a woman who was once her. And by that I mean me. And I don't mean I was famous when I was 13, because I was not. And I don't mean that people were on my parents' case about how I looked. What I mean is, I was a girl who developed into womanhood very early. And that takes a toll on you mentally and emotionally. And honestly, it also takes a toll on your parents. I had to get my first brassiere when I was 8.5 years old. 8.5 was when my mother was like, oh, whoa, yeah, those are coming in. We got to contain those. Now, as an 8.5-year-old girl, I went to Catholic school, but I went to a co-ed school, and we play outside at recess, the boys and all that. And it did not occur to me as an 8.5-year-old child that I needed a brassiere. Just didn't. But my mother saw what was coming, which was puberty, whether anybody involved was ready for it or not, me, her, or my father. And side note, none of us were ready for it, but there it was. And so she took me shopping to get my first brassiere. It was a completely mortifying experience, as I'm sure every woman of a certain age can tell that particular story. Your mom or your aunt or your grandmother or whatever prominent woman was in your life at that time took you to a store like Macy's or Nordstrom or places that don't exist anymore like Bambergers, and you got fitted for a brassiere by a woman who had been doing it for years and who in most cases was probably old enough to be your grandmother. Now, can you picture me at 8.5 with my mother dragging me into a department store to get a garment I didn't really have a handle on, and then telling me I needed to wear this every day? It was just a whole lot. It really was. And the little I did understand about wearing a brassiere was from watching my mother get dressed to go out. Now, I'm sure most people my age may not know what I'm talking about, but women who are older, women who are into their 50s and 60s and 70s will know exactly what I'm talking about. And scarily enough, I found out recently they still make these. There used to be something called the 18-hour, let's call it a onesie. I don't remember what it's actually called, but I'm going to call it a onesie. And what that was a bra and a girdle all in one garment. So it had like, I don't know, 20 hooks down the back for the bra part. And then you'd pull the girdle down over what you needed to work the girdle out with. And then it had snaps in the crotch area. And my mother used to wear one of those every day to church, to work, to take me to my friend's house, everywhere. And all I could think as a little girl and seeing her work and struggle to get into one of those things was, I am never wearing one of those ever. I don't care. So my first brassiere was not that. It was just a brassiere, but I was still not happy about it because I was 8.5 and I just thought this was crazy and ridiculous. And none of my friends had reached the point where they needed one of those. So I was just annoyed by the whole situation. Fast forward a year and a half when I was 10 is when what we used to call Aunt Flo showed up. And my mother was horrified and terrified and beside herself because for her, that didn't happen till she was almost 17. So the fact that one generation later, her 10-year-old daughter was now having to deal with this was just way too much for her. My father, of course, was not amused either because he knew that meant he really had to be on his game with me and boys, or at least that's what he thought. Now, my thought as a 10-year-old girl was like, this is all gross and I want nothing to do with it. So my parents had sat me down and given me the birds and the bees talk before Aunt Flo showed up, but it was just horrifying to me on every level. So by the time I was 13, which is what Blue Ivy Carter is now, I was well developed. I was already a B cup. Now, eventually, I would go on to I was a triple D at one point in my life, which was just a whole lot. But I was a B when I was 13. I'd had my period for 3 years at that point, and I looked very much like a 17 or 18-year-old rather than the 13-year-old I actually was. And what I think a lot of people have missed in the conversation about Blue Ivy is that her development, her height, her womanly look is not a choice. It's who she is. It's who she is becoming. She's already taller than her mother. Beyonce is 5'6". The average American woman is 5'3". So Beyonce is already taller than average, and now her daughter is taller than she is at 13. It's not that her parents are trying to rush her into womanhood or adulthood. She is becoming a woman. Now, is she a woman right now? Absolutely not. She's 13. I have never heard interviews with her. I don't know that her parents let her do that. But regardless of how mature she seems for her age, or how mature she might even be, because her parents are famous and her life is not the life that average kids have, she's still not a grown up. She's a 13-year-old girl. And the flip side to that is so many people have said, for example, that the dress she wore to the Grammys was too mature and it was inappropriate. And my question to them would be, what would you have a 5'8", 5'10" tall girl wear? Would you like her to wear little rosettes and little socks with lace on them, or petticoats, or whatever you think a 13-year-old should wear? That's not going to look appropriate. She would look completely ridiculous. So the fact that she was wearing a strapless dress at 13, I think people really need to cut her some slack and understand that she is growing into who she is. Hearing people talk about Blue Ivy also took me back to what people said about Chelsea Clinton when Chelsea Clinton was a teenage girl, and what people said about Amy Carter. And when her father came to the White House, Amy Carter was a 9-year-old girl. And people said some of the most horrendous things about her, and then about Chelsea Clinton, and then especially about Sasha and Malia Obama. And so, do I think part of this conversation about Blue Ivy is based in race? Of course it is. Hello, welcome to America. Everything is about race on one level or another. But I also think it's about people not understanding how difficult it is to navigate those first few years, 12, 13, 14, as a girl who is much more mature and developed than her friends. And so I wanted people to keep that in mind for future reference when they talk about Blue Ivy and what she looks like and what she should wear and what she shouldn't wear and all those types of things. Trust me, her parents are not happy with the fact that their 13-year-old daughter looks 17 or 18. But the truth is, they cannot do a thing about it, and neither can she. Puberty happens when it happens. It shows up when it shows up, and everybody's got to deal with it. Right, wrong, indifferent, everybody's got to cope. In terms of my parents, it probably took my mother a year, maybe a year and a half after my period arrived to get in the mindset of, oh, yeah, my daughter's becoming a woman at 11, at 12, way before I thought this would happen, but I have to cope with it. In terms of my dad, I think most girls can relate to this. My dad never wanted to talk about it again. Once he lived through the initial stage of the period and all that goes along with it, it was a subject he was perfectly happy not to tackle again. He left that to my mother. And I think a lot of dads feel like that. It's not a position they're comfortable with, and no father wants to see his daughter become a woman. He always wants her to be his little girl, but that's really not how life works. So I just wanted to chime in and put my voice out in support of Blue Ivy Carter and who she's becoming, because you know what? It's not easy. And it's especially not easy in the limelight in the worldview when absolutely everyone has an opinion about what you look like. I want to thank everybody for joining me this week. If you are not subscribed, please subscribe to the podcast. We'd love to have you join us on a weekly basis. There should be a subscribe button somewhere below my image where you can sign up and you'll get notified every time I drop a new episode. I do these on a weekly basis at minimum. Sometimes there are also short videos that go along with these episodes. So please join the podcast family, and I will see everybody again next week. Take care.